The declaration. The galaxy had never feared humans. The great Zorvax Empire, rulers of 1,000 worlds, saw them as weak, small, insignificant. To the Empire, humanity was just another species to conquer. Now, Earth was burning. The Imperial Supreme Commander Vakor stood on the grand stage of the Imperial Senate. His golden armor shone under the bright lights. His 4 red eyes glowed with confidence. Billions of screens across the galaxy broadcasted his speech. He spoke with a voice full of power. "Humans are finished," Vakor declared. "Their cities burn. Their fleets are dust. Their armies are broken. Yet they refuse to kneel." He paused, letting the silence crush any hope in those watching. The audience of alien rulers nodded. They had seen what happened to Earth's colonies. The mighty human fleet had fallen. Their soldiers had fought bravely, but bravery meant nothing against the unstoppable empire. Vakor smiled, sharp teeth glinting. "We give them one final chance," he said. "Surrender or be erased from history." The broadcast spread across every human colony, every hidden resistance base, even on Titan 7, where General Alexander Graves and his soldiers hid. The message played on a cracked screen. The room was silent. The men and women of the Earth Defense Forces watched as the mighty alien ruler insulted their people. He called them weak. He said their struggle was pointless. He said humanity was done. Graves sat still. His uniform was torn. His face had cuts from the last battle. His soldiers looked at him, waiting. The broadcast ended. Silence. Then, Graves stood. A camera drone hovered nearby, waiting for a response. His voice would be heard. The entire galaxy was watching. He stepped forward, eyes full of fire. "You want us to surrender," he said, voice steady. "You burn our homes, kill our families, and now you tell us to bow." He shook his head. "No." The soldiers around him clenched their fists. Their anger burned as strong as their generals. Graves continued, stepping closer to the camera. "You call us weak," he said, his voice rising. "But weakness is running from a fair fight. Weakness is thinking we'll break just because you destroy a few cities." He raised a hand and pointed at the screen where Vakor had spoken. "You stand there in your golden halls, far away from battle. You think your empire will last forever. But you don't know humans." He took a deep breath, his voice turning cold. "You want war?" He stared into the camera, his eyes unshaken. "We'll bring it." Silence followed. Then the room erupted. The soldiers roared, slamming their fists against metal tables. A cheer, full of defiance, full of hope, echoed across the base. The message spread. Across the galaxy, resistance forces received it. The humans who had lost hope, who thought the war was over, felt their hearts burn again. The Empire had expected humanity to kneel. Instead, they had awakened something far more dangerous. The first strike. The galaxy was silent. General Alexander Graves' words had spread like wildfire. His defiant challenge to the Empire, broadcasted across 1,000 worlds, had shaken even the most powerful rulers. The Zorvax Empire had expected fear. They had expected surrender. But instead, humanity chose war. The Empire's response. In the grand halls of the Imperial High Command, Supreme Commander Vakor sat in his throne-like chair, his red eyes burning with rage. His long fingers tapped against the metal table as reports poured in. "Ridiculous," he hissed. "A dying species dares to threaten us." A Zorvax officer, his armor gleaming, stepped forward. "My lord, our spies report that General Graves has united scattered human forces. They are regrouping on Titan 7. Vakor's claws tightened. "Then we shall crush them. Send a strike force. End this farce." The order was given. A fleet of 20 Imperial warships, each one capable of destroying an entire colony, set course for Titan 7. They expected an easy victory. They were wrong. The trap is set. On Titan 7, Deep within the icy caverns, General Graves stood before a group of hardened warriors. They were all that remained of Earth's elite defense force. Their weapons were outdated. Their ships were old. But their spirit was unbroken. Graves looked around the room. Some were ex-soldiers, some were pilots, some were engineers. All of them had lost something to the Empire. "We don't have the numbers," Graves said. "We don't have the firepower." His voice was steady, his gaze sharp. "But we have something more powerful." The soldiers leaned in. "We have rage." A murmur spread through the crowd. "We won't fight the Empire the way they expect." Graves continued. "They think we'll meet them head-on. They think we'll fight like soldiers on a battlefield." His lips curled into a smirk. "We won't." He turned to a hologram showing Titan VII's surface. "The Empire is sending a fleet. They'll arrive in 12 hours. And when they do, they will walk into a trap. The first strike." 12 hours later, the Imperial warships arrived above Titan VII. From the bridge of the flagship Invincible, Admiral Kareth looked down at the icy wasteland. "A frozen rock," he sneered. "Destroy their base and finish this." The warships descended, preparing to fire. Then the sky exploded. Hundreds of hidden charges, planted deep in the ice, detonated at once. The ground shattered, swallowing the first wave of landing troops into a frozen abyss. From the cliffs, human railguns fired, their projectiles tearing through the underbellies of enemy ships. EMP blasts disabled Imperial shields, leaving their massive vessels exposed. Panic spread through the Zorvax ranks. They had not expected this. They had never fought an enemy who fought like this. From underground bunkers, human fighters launched into the sky, swarming the confused Imperial forces. They didn't fight for glory. They fought to win. The fall of the Invincible. On the Invincible, alarms blared. Admiral Kareth watched in horror as his fleet crumbled. "This is impossible," he whispered. "They were supposed to be weak." Before he could react, a human dropship crashed through the side of the bridge. The doors blasted open, and General Graves stepped through, his rifle raised. Kareth reached for his weapon, but Graves shot first. The Admiral collapsed, his golden armor now stained with his own blood. Graves stepped forward, looking at the command console. He activated the ship's main intercom. His voice echoed through every Imperial ship. "This is General Graves," he said, calm but firm. "Your leader is dead. Your fleet is burning. Surrender or join him." Some Zorvax officers resisted, but many, terrified and shaken, dropped their weapons. The mighty Imperial fleet, sent to crush humanity, had been humiliated. The message is sent. Hours later, on a hidden human base, a message was transmitted across the stars. It was not from the Empire. It was from humanity. A video played, showing the wreckage of Imperial ships burning on Titan VII. Then, General Graves appeared on screen. "We were told to surrender," he said. "We were told we had no chance." He paused, his gaze hard. "But we just sent the Empire a message." He stepped closer to the camera. "Humanity is not weak. Humanity is not afraid." A slow smile formed on his face. "You wanted war. You have no idea what's coming." The message spread across the galaxy. The Empire had made a fatal mistake. They had underestimated humanity. The Empire retaliates. The Empire could not ignore what had happened on Titan VII. It was meant to be an easy victory, a display of power to crush humanity's last hope. Instead, it had turned into a humiliation. A fleet of 20 Imperial warships, led by the once mighty Admiral Kareth, had been obliterated. A force that was supposed to erase humanity from history was now nothing but debris floating in space. And worst of all, the entire galaxy had seen it. Rebellions across the outer colonies stirred with hope. Civilizations that had once feared the Empire began whispering, if the humans, those weak, insignificant creatures, could defeat the mighty Zorvax fleet, then maybe, just maybe, the Empire was not invincible. The Imperial High Command could not allow this. The Supreme Commander's wrath. In the heart of the Imperial homeworld, within the Black Citadel, Supreme Commander Vakor watched the battle footage in silence. His sharp claws tapped against the golden armrest of his throne. The room was filled with Imperial generals, admirals, and strategists, each one afraid. They had never seen their leader this quiet. Quiet meant rage. Finally, Vakor spoke. "This is an insult," he said, voice calm yet deadly. "Humanity should have been broken by now. Instead, they stand defiant." The gathered officers lowered their heads. They had no excuses. "They think they have won a victory," Vakor continued. "They believe they are safe." His four glowing eyes narrowed. "We shall remind them of their place." He rose to his feet. "Send the execution fleet." Gasps filled the room. The execution fleet was unstoppable, an armada of over 100 Imperial warships, led by Grand Marshal Calarax, a ruthless warlord known for leaguing planets in ashes. Vakor's lips curled into a cruel smile. "Burn everything. The battle for Mars begins." The human fleet had barely begun to recover when the execution fleet arrived at Mars. Mars was the last major stronghold before Earth. If it fell, the Empire would have a clear path to humanity's homeworld. From the bridge of the UEDF flagship Ironclad, General Graves watched the approaching armada. 100 warships. His forces had 12. The math was not in their favor. Around him, his officers looked nervous. Some whispered about retreat, but Graves did not flinch. "We are not running," he said. "We fight." His voice was steady, confident. His soldiers saw the fire in his eyes, and fear turned into resolve. "We beat them once," he continued, "and we will do it again. But this time, we are ready." The ambush. The execution fleet descended toward Mars, expecting another easy slaughter. Instead, the sky turned against them. From hidden bases on the Martian surface, massive energy cannons fired, slicing through Imperial ships like knives through flesh. Human stealth ships, invisible to Imperial sensors, darted through the chaos, planting EMP charges on enemy cruisers. And then, the Martian shipyards came alive. A fleet of experimental warships, secretly built in the underground docks of Mars, launched into battle. Faster, deadlier, unlike anything the Empire had seen before. Grand Marshal Calarax, watching from his command ship Doombringer, snarled. "Their desperation is impressive," he admitted, "but it won't save them." He turned to his communications officer. "Deploy the shock troopers." The ground assault. As the space battle raged, thousands of drop pods rained down on Mars. The elite Zorvax warriors, enhanced with cybernetic implants, stormed the human defense lines. The battle on the red sands was brutal. Laser fire lit up the sky. Human mechs clashed against towering Zorvax war machines. Every street, every building, every crater became a battleground. The human forces fought with everything they had. They knew what was at stake. But the Zorvax were relentless. The human lines began to break. The last stand at Olympus Mons. The final human stronghold on Mars was Olympus Mons, the largest volcano in the solar system. If it fell, Mars was lost. General Graves led the last battalion, standing at the gates of the fortress. His soldiers were exhausted. Their weapons were running low. The enemy was closing in. He could hear the Imperial war cries echoing through the canyon. He could see their war machines marching forward. This was it. Graves activated his communicator. To all remaining forces, he said, "This is General Graves." He took a deep breath. "We are outnumbered. We are outgunned. And we are standing on the last piece of Mars that is still ours." He looked at his soldiers, at the men and women who had followed him into hell. "The Empire thinks this is the end." He clenched his fist. "They think we will break." He stepped forward, raising his rifle. "Let's show them what humans are made of." The soldiers roared. The Zorvax charge. The final battle for Mars had begun, and humanity would not go down without a fight. The turning point. The battle for Mars had shaken the galaxy. Humanity had done the impossible. Again. They had stood against the execution fleet, the Empire's most feared armada, and held the line. Though Mars was scared, though the red sands were soaked in blood, humanity had not fallen. But the war was far from over. Now the Empire prepared for total extermination. And yet, something unexpected was happening across the galaxy. The Empire cracks. For centuries, the Zorvax Empire had ruled with an iron fist. They had crushed rebellions, destroyed entire civilizations, and enslaved countless species. They had never lost a war. But now, after the defeats at Titan VII and Mars, cracks began to show. On the planet Tessera Prime, home to the Tesseri race, whispers spread in the dark alleys. The Tesseri had served the Empire for generations, their people forced into labor camps. But now, they heard rumors. Rumors of a species that had wounded the Empire. A species that refused to kneel. In the grand palace of King Selvath, an imperial governor sneered. The humans are nothing. The Zorvax governor spat. Their victories are accidents. The Empire will crush them soon. King Selvath said nothing. But later that night, in secret, he sent a message. To General Alexander Graves. The unexpected offer. On the hidden human base Argos 9, Graves studied the encrypted transmission. His officers stood around him, confused. Tessera Prime. One of them said, "They've never helped anyone but themselves." Graves frowned. That's what I thought too. He played the message. A holographic image of King Selvath appeared. "I am no friend of humanity," the Tesseri king said. "But I am no fool either. The Empire is not as strong as it once was. If you can hurt them, others will follow." A pause. "I propose a deal. A meeting. If you are truly as strong as they fear, prove it. And you may gain more than just a battle. You may gain an army." Silence filled the room. The officers turned to Graves. "It's a trap," one said. "Could be," Graves admitted. "But if it's real, it could change everything." The gamble. Graves and a small strike team traveled in a cloaked stealth frigate to Tessera Prime. If the Empire detected them, they would be obliterated. Inside the darkened halls of the Tesseri royal palace, the meeting began. King Selvath studied Graves, his sharp yellow eyes unreadable. "You don't look like much," the Tesseri king said. Graves smirked. "Neither did my people before we started killing Zorvax warlords." The king chuckled. "Fair enough." He leaned forward. "The Empire will fall one day. I had assumed it would take a century. But you," his eyes narrowed, "you may do it sooner." Graves crossed his arms. "Why help us?" The king's voice turned cold. "Because I want to be on the winning side." Then he gestured to his guards. The doors opened. Other alien leaders stepped inside. Leaders from 5 other species, all once under the Empire's rule, stood before Graves. Some looked doubtful, others curious. King Selvath gestured at them. "They have all suffered under the Empire. They want to fight. But they need proof." Graves raised an eyebrow. "Proof." The king smirked. "Something big. Something that shows the galaxy that humanity isn't just a nuisance, but a true threat to the Empire." Graves' mind worked fast. Then an idea formed. A bold, reckless, insane idea. "We're going to steal a Zorvax dreadnought." The room fell into stunned silence. Then King Selvath grinned. "I like you, human." The heist of the century. The Dreadnought-class warships were the Empire's most powerful vessels. Each was the size of a city, armed with weapons that could destroy moons. And one of them, the Dominion, was currently docked at the Imperial shipyard of Corveth 6, undergoing repairs. If humanity could steal it, the entire galaxy would know. If they failed, They would all die. But General Graves had never been afraid of impossible odds. The plan was set. A strike team of elite human soldiers and Tessari warriors would infiltrate the shipyard. Once aboard, they would override the controls, hijack the Dominion, and blast their way out before the Imperial fleet could react. It was suicide. It was insane. And it was exactly the kind of madness that made humanity so dangerous. The infiltration begins. At midnight, under the cover of a solar storm, the operation began. Graves led the team as they hacked their way through the shipyard's defenses, disguising themselves in stolen Imperial armor. They moved fast, taking out patrols in the shadows. They'd breached the docking bay, slipping inside the massive dreadnought before alarms could sound. The ship was a fortress, crawling with Zorvax troops. Every hallway was guarded. Every system was locked. But Graves and his team fought their way through, using hacked security drones, explosive charges, and raw, human determination. They reached the bridge just as the alarms blared across the shipyard. The Empire knew they were here, and the full Imperial fleet was on its way. The final countdown. On the bridge of the Dominion, Graves grabbed the control panel and activated the ship's thrusters. "Get us out of here," he shouted. The engines roared to life. The massive dreadnought lifted from the dock, shaking the station as it powered up. Outside, the Imperial fleet arrived, firing at their stolen ship. The hull shook as plasma blasts struck the shields. "Shields at 40%. An officer shouted. Graves didn't hesitate. "Fire EV or I thing." The stolen dreadnought's cannons roared. Explosions ripped through the Imperial blockade, sending ships spiraling into the void. The Dominion punched through the enemy ranks and vanished into hyperspace. The galaxy reacts. The next morning, the entire galaxy woke to a shocking transmission. A video played. General Graves stood on the bridge of the stolen dreadnought, looking straight into the camera. "This is the Dominion," he said. "It belongs to us now." A pause. "The Empire thinks it owns the stars." A smirk. "They're wrong." The screen went black. The galaxy held its breath. And the Zorvax Empire finally realized. They weren't just fighting humans anymore. They were fighting a revolution. Earth's last stand. The Zorvax Empire had ruled the galaxy for centuries. They had crushed entire civilizations, erased planets from history, and bent countless species to their will. But now, for the first time, the Empire was afraid. Because humanity had done the impossible again. They had stolen an Imperial dreadnought, the pride of the Zorvax fleet. They had humiliated the Empire before the entire galaxy. And now, they weren't just fighting to survive. They were fighting to win. The Empire strikes back. In the depths of the Black Citadel, Supreme Commander Vakor watched the stolen dreadnought Dominion tear through Imperial supply lines. It was a symbol of defiance, a symbol that humanity could not be broken. He turned to Grand Warlord Calarax, the most feared commander in the Empire. "The humans have embarrassed us for the last time," Vakor growled. "It is time to end this war." Calarax, clad in dark war armor, bared his razor-sharp teeth. "I will bring you Earth itself, Supreme Commander," he said. Vakor's red eyes burned. "Destroy everything." Calarax bowed, and the Imperial Doomsday Fleet, a force so vast it could blot out the stars, set course for Earth. The warning. On the bridge of the Dominion, General Alexander Graves and his crew intercepted the enemy transmission. Their worst fears were confirmed. The largest fleet in Imperial history was coming. Earth had days before the invasion. Graves clenched his fists. He turned to his officers. "Send the signal," he ordered. "All human forces, every ally, every rebel. This is it." Within hours, Earth's defenses mobilized. Orbital defense platforms activated. Massive war factories on the moon built last-minute weapons. Every remaining human warship was called back home. Allied forces from Tessera Prime and the rebel colonies began arriving. But it still wasn't enough. The enemy fleet was too big. If they fought the Empire head-on, they would lose. They needed a plan. A trap. Something so reckless, so insane, so human, that the Empire would never see it coming. The unthinkable strategy. Graves called a war council. The best military minds of humanity and their new alien allies gathered. They studied the Imperial attack routes, the fleet formations, the weaknesses in their ranks. Finally, a strategy took shape. We let them reach Earth, Graves said. We make them think they've already won. Gasps filled the room. That's suicide, one officer said. Graves shook his head. No, that's bait. He pointed at the holographic battle map. They'll drop their main fleet into low orbit to bombard Earth. That's when we hit them from the inside. A silent pause. You mean board their warships? One of the Tesserae leaders asked. Graves nodded. We don't just fight their fleet. We steal it. It was insanity. It was impossible. And it was exactly what humanity needed to do. The invasion begins. 3 days later, the sky turned black. The Imperial Doomsday Fleet had arrived. Thousands of warships, millions of troops. The Earth Defense Forces braced for impact. In the command center beneath Washington, D.C., the final messages were sent. This is Earth's last stand. Fight like hell. Then, the Empire unleashed hell. The battle for Earth. Massive plasma bombardments struck the planet's surface. Cities burned. Oceans boiled. Skyscrapers crumbled like sandcastles. But humanity fought back. Orbital cannons tore through Imperial destroyers. Stealth bombers launched from hidden bunkers in Antarctica. Massive EMP pulses fried enemy targeting systems. But even with all their tricks, the Empire's forces kept coming. Then the second phase of Graves' plan began. The counterattack. In the middle of the chaos, human strike teams launched from hidden bases on the moon. They hijacked enemy troop carriers, disguised themselves in Imperial armor, and infiltrated the Zorvax command ships. They turned the Empire's weapons against them. Within minutes, chaos spread through the Imperial fleet. Some ships shut down entirely, their crews eliminated by the infiltrators. Others turned against their own fleet, their controls hijacked by human hackers. For the first time, the Empire's unstoppable war machine was fighting itself. The showdown. In orbit, aboard the Imperial flagship Wrath of Fakor, Warlord Calarax watched in fury as his fleet fell apart. And then, the doors exploded inward. General Graves, leading a squad of human and Tesserae commandos, stormed the bridge. Calarax roared and charged, wielding a massive energy blade. Graves barely dodged the first strike. Sparks flew as Calarax's blade sliced through metal walls. The two warriors clashed. Man versus monster. Calarax was stronger, faster, a genetic weapon of war. But Graves was smarter. He baited Calarax into a reckless attack, dodged at the last second, and drove his combat knife into the warlord's throat. Rax gasped. Blood spilled onto the floor. Graves grabbed the warlord's command override device and activated the fleet's emergency signal. Across the Imperial Armada, ship commanders saw their leader fall. And then they heard Graves' voice. This is General Graves. Your warlord is dead. Your fleet is in flames. Surrender now, or be erased. Some fought to the last breath. Most fled. The mighty Doomsday Fleet, meant to end humanity, collapsed. The sky above Earth cleared. And for the first time in history, the Empire had lost a full-scale invasion. The aftermath. Across the galaxy, the news spread like wildfire. Earth had survived. The Empire had been defeated. And humanity had proven they were not just fighting for their lives. They were fighting for the future of the entire galaxy. Final scene. Graves' victory speech. Standing atop the ruins of the UEDF headquarters, Graves looked at the burning wreckage of Imperial ships in the sky. A holographic transmission went out to the entire galaxy. Graves stared into the camera. You wanted war. A pause. You got one. The screen faded to black. The war was not over, but humanity was no longer fighting alone. They were leading the charge. The fall of a tyrant. The Zorvax Empire was reeling. The mighty Doomsday Fleet, their ultimate weapon of war, had been destroyed at Earth. Their forces were in disarray. Their warlord, Calarax, was dead, slain by General Alexander Graves himself. But the war was not over. Supreme Commander Vakor, the ruler of the Zorvax Empire, still lived, and he would not allow humanity to exist. The last stand of the Empire. Deep in the heart of the Zorvax homeworld, Zorixol, the Imperial High Command met in desperation. The palace halls, once filled with the arrogance of a species that had ruled the stars, were now filled with fear. Vakor sat on his golden throne, his red eyes burning with rage. His empire was crumbling before him. How did this happen? He growled. His voice echoed in the massive chamber. How did a primitive species bring us to our knees? The room was silent. Finally, a Zorvax general stepped forward, his voice hesitant. The humans, Supreme Commander, they are not like the others we have conquered. They do not surrender. They do not break. Vakor's claws clenched the armrest of his throne. Then we will end them all, he snarled. His eyes flickered toward the massive war map in front of him. His empire was collapsing, system by system. Rebellions were rising on a dozen worlds. Alien species, once too afraid to fight, had taken up arms after humanity's victories. The balance of power had shifted. The Empire needed one final strike. One last act of terror to remind the galaxy why the Zorvax were feared. Vakor stood. Prepare the apocalypse cannon. Gasps filled the room. The apocalypse cannon has not been fired in millennia, one general stammered. It could destabilize the entire. Silence. Vakor snapped. Fire it at Earth. Let humanity watch their home burn. The order was given. And across the galaxy, the countdown to Earth's destruction began. The race against time. On the bridge of the Dominion, General Graves and his team intercepted the transmission. Their blood ran cold. The apocalypse cannon, a superweapon the size of a moon, capable of wiping out entire star systems, was charging. It would fire in 36 hours. If it fired, Earth would be gone. There was only one option. We take the fight to Zorixol, Graves said. His voice was calm, but his eyes burned with fury. We end this war where it started. A murmur spread through the command room. A direct attack on the Zorvax homeworld. That was suicide. It was the most heavily defended planet in the galaxy. And yet, after all humanity had endured, there was no turning back now. If we fail, Graves said, we lose everything. Silence. Then, one by one, his officers nodded. The message was sent. Every remaining human and allied warship rallied for the final assault. The battle for Zorixol had begun. The invasion of the Zorvax throne world. The Human Alliance Fleet, a force of stolen Imperial dreadnoughts, repurposed rebel warships, and Earth's last remaining battlecruisers, dropped out of hyperspace above Zorixol. And the sky ignited. The Zorvax Home Defense Armada, the Empire's most elite warships, was waiting. The battle that followed shook the heavens. Human and alien fighters weaved through enemy formations, striking at weak points. Massive orbital cannons fired, turning the battlefield into a storm of explosions. Human boarding parties infiltrated Imperial command ships, taking over enemy weapons and using them against their own fleet. For every human ship that fell, 2 Zorvax vessels burned. Humanity was winning. But time was running out. The apocalypse cannon was still charging, and only one man could stop it. The showdown, Graves versus Vakor. With the battle raging in orbit, Graves led a strike team down to the surface of Zorixol. Their target, the Imperial Palace, where Vakor controlled the apocalypse cannon. Through fire and blood, they fought their way inside. Hallways filled with Imperial guards fell as human forces pushed forward. Explosives breached ancient gates, tearing open the last line of defense. Finally, Graves and his team reached the throne room. Vakor stood waiting. He was not afraid. His golden armor glowed under the burning lights. His 4 red eyes locked onto Graves. "You should have accepted your place, human," Vakor growled. "Now your species will die." Graves didn't flinch. "You first." Then the final battle began. Vakor charged, his energy blade slicing through the air. Graves dodged, rolling across the floor. He fired his plasma rifle. Vakor deflected the shots like a demon. They clashed in the center of the throne room. Vakor was faster, stronger. His claws tore through Graves' armor, drawing blood. But Graves was smarter. He fought dirty, throwing debris, using shock grenades, turning the environment into a weapon. The fight raged on, until finally, Graves saw an opening. Vakor lunged. Graves sidestepped, grabbed a fallen Imperial sword, and drove it straight through Vakor's chest. The Supreme Commander gasped. His red eyes dimmed. He fell to his knees. "You," Vakor choked, "you cannot defeat the Empire." Graves leaned in. "The Empire's already dead," he whispered. "It just doesn't know it yet." Then he twisted the blade. Vakor collapsed, lifeless. The Empire had fallen. The end of the war. With their leader dead, the Zorvax forces surrendered. The Apocalypse cannon was shut down. The war was over. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as humanity, once thought weak and powerless, stood victorious. On the bridge of the Dominion, Graves looked out at the stars. It was over. Humanity had won. But this was not the end. It was the beginning. Because now, the galaxy belonged to them. The speech that shook the galaxy. The war was over. The Zorvax Empire, once the undisputed ruler of the stars, had fallen. Their fleets lay in ruins. Their armies were scattered. Their supreme commander, Vakor, was dead, slain by General Alexander Graves in the heart of the Imperial Palace. For the first time in millennia, the galaxy was free. But peace did not come easily. The end of one empire meant the beginning of a new struggle, one that would decide the future of all civilizations. And at the center of it stood humanity. The aftermath of war. The fall of the Empire sent shockwaves through the galaxy. Planets once ruled by the Zorvax declared independence. Former Imperial allies turned on each other, trying to claim power. Old enemies resurfaced, eager to fill the void left by the Empire's collapse. Across the stars, chaos reigned. But there was one undeniable truth. Humanity had won. And now, the galaxy was watching. The debate, what comes next? On Earth, in the newly rebuilt United Earth Defense Command Center, leaders from every major human faction gathered. Military commanders, political leaders, scientists, and ambassadors filled the grand chamber. For the first time in history, humanity held the power to shake the galaxy. But how? The room erupted into debate. We should claim the Empire's former territory. One general argued. Humanity fought for this. We deserve to rule. No, an ambassador countered. We cannot become what we just destroyed. We must establish peace, not conquest. The galaxy is fractured, a scientist added. Without leadership, chaos will consume it. If we do nothing, another empire will rise. Maybe worse than the Zorvax. Then we lead, another voice said. Not as conquerors, but as protectors. The arguments continued for hours. But one thing was clear. They needed a decision. And only one man could deliver it. General Graves' moment. In the center of the chamber, General Alexander Graves stood silently, listening. He had led humanity through the darkest war in history. He had fought in the blood-soaked trenches, stolen warships from the enemy, and stared death in the face. But now, As the leaders of Earth and their allies turned to him for guidance, this was his greatest challenge yet. He stepped forward. The room fell silent. All eyes were on him. He activated the Galactic transmission array, a communication system that would broadcast his words to every world in the known galaxy. It was time to send a message, the speech that shook the galaxy. The screen flickered. Across thousands of planets, in hidden resistance cells, on once enslaved worlds, in the remains of imperial strongholds, everyone watched. General Graves stood tall, dressed not in a ceremonial robe, but in his worn, battle-scarred uniform. He spoke not as a ruler, but as a soldier. "We were never supposed to win this war," he began. His voice was steady, strong. "They called us weak. They called us primitive. They said we would be erased." He paused. The weight of history hung in the silence. But here we stand. The transmission was being watched everywhere, by human and alien alike, by warriors who had fought beside him, by former enemies who had doubted him. Humanity did not ask for this war, Graves continued. We did not seek to rule the stars. We only wanted to live, to be left alone, to build a future for our people. He clenched his fists. But the Empire thought itself invincible. It thought it could burn our worlds and face no consequences. His eyes burned with fire. They were wrong. Across the galaxy, oppressed species cheered. "We have fought. We have bled. And we have won," he said. "But war is not the future of this galaxy." He turned his gaze toward the leaders of the newly freed worlds. "The Zorvax Empire is dead. What happens next is up to us." Another pause. "I know many of you fear that humanity will replace the Empire, that we will take their throne and rule as they did." He shook his head. "We are not conquerors. We are not tyrants. We are not the Zorvax." Gasps of surprise spread through the chamber. Even some human leaders were stunned. "We did not fight this war to take their place," Graves continued. "We fought for freedom, for our right to exist. And now, for the first time, we have the chance to build something better." He stepped forward, his voice growing stronger. "We offer an alliance," he declared. "Not an empire, but a coalition, a united force of free worlds, one that stands against oppression, one that ensures that no species, no world, will ever be ruled by fear again." Silence. Then a voice spoke from the delegation of Tessera Prime. "We accept." Another leader, one of the former enslaved races of the Empire, stood. "We accept." One by one, voices rose. "We accept." The Free Galactic Coalition was born. The galaxy reacts. The response was immediate. On former imperial worlds, rebellions turned into revolutions, rallying under humanity's banner. On Earth, millions cheered as the dream of a united future became reality. On the edges of the galaxy, those who sought to rule through tyranny watched in fear, because now the galaxy had guardians. The final moments. As the crowd in the war chamber erupted into cheers, General Graves looked out a nearby window, gazing at the stars. For so long, those stars had been enemy territory. Now, they were theirs to protect. A voice spoke behind him. It was Commander Vega, his second in command. "Where do we go from here?" she asked. Graves smiled. "Forward," he said. The camera feed faded to black, and the legend of humanity's rise was just beginning.